conversation be had with not just the kindergarten teachers, but also potentially first and I would say potentially second grade teachers as well, because I can just speak from my personal experience that my second grader did not touch, and my second grader now barely touches his iPad versus, say, my fourth grader who uses it at home a little bit more.
It certainly will, but of course, when we're talking about the deployment in kindergarten next year, it gives even a little bit more time. If we're talking about spring of next year for kindergarten, then it gives even a little more time for first grade. The other thing to think about too that we hear frequently is because we have a half-day kindergarten program, the time available to utilize devices isn't quite the same as it is in first grade or second grade where we have a full day. So there's just maybe some more variables that exist in kindergarten that make the conversation more challenging than it might in first and second grade, but certainly it's a conversation that will progress as we roll the Chromebooks up into the higher grades.
Director Bluff.
Thank you. Going from an iPad to a Chromebook, I even know that fifth grade students have a hard time logging on. Is there anything that we have done to try to help a classroom teacher with having 25 kids say, help me at the exact same time?
Yeah, and actually it's a lot of the work that our technology team has been doing with the teachers who are trialing the devices now. I had the opportunity to attend one of those meetings right before the holiday, actually, and that was one of the challenges, right? So using ClassLink that has a number of apps, for example, that a student might be selecting from for a student who's 5 or 6 years old. If we could pare that down, for example, we were in conversation about whether or not we could do that so that kids could get logged on quicker to particular apps that they might be using. So that's precisely the type of questions we're trying to answer in this trial period. And again, our tech team has been supporting our teachers in that
But even
venture.
to the point of logging on to the machine itself, do you have any
Sure.
miracles?
A miracle QR code. Everybody knows what a QR code is. So they can open the Chromebook, kindergarten to fifth grade, they touch a blue button, they smile at the camera, they go like this, and they're logged in.
Okay.
They go straight to ClassLink, and that's for a one-stop shop. That's everything they need, and they can go anywhere they need to from there.
And I also agree that we should not be taking those home, because if you've ever seen a first grader throw their school bag in the middle of the street to go play with a friend, there goes your ninth grader.
So I do just want one caveat to taking devices home, and something that we think about and want to continue to think about in relation to this conversation is providing a one-to-one device is potentially a measure of ensuring that there's equity across in terms of access across all students. Because if we don't send a device home, then there's a good probability that students whose parents have the wherewithal and money available to buy them devices, they're going to access those things at home, and perhaps students whose parents don't have that same ability might not. And so it's just an important component that we consider. Doesn't mean that's where we end up. It's just a component of the conversation.
Maybe it's a few times a week, but we're also talking about
so
those heavy book bags on those little tiny shoulders.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. That's what I mean when I think when we talk about expectation, right? So if we're going to send them home, for what purpose and how often? And mom and dad or whoever's at home with that student, what is the expectation for use? How do they log on? Is it for practice? How do they get there? And so I think that's that layer of communication with parents I think we have to provide before we make decisions around that.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Dr. Chance, I know we're just moving forward. I just remember the days when my son was in elementary school. He didn't get laptops and iPads and anything, and he had to your point, with equity though, it was an app, like IXL and stuff was an app, and if you had a device at home, you could log in. So I understand that, it's between who has it, they practice, and who doesn't, they don't practice. But just given that the kids are barely using it, and they're not really taking it home, and then now we have the, think about costs of having cards if they leave it back in school and stuff like that. Do you think we'll ever go back to a simpler time where kindergarten through second grade gets no device outside the school? And, if there's any need, it will go on a rotation basis.
Kindergarten through second, I would probably say no. I do think it's worth the conversation at kindergarten that I was sort of alluding to. And again, my youngest is 8, and he's in a district where they're one-to-one, and they sent them home for the first 2 years, and this year they're not. And so, but of course, we find ways on the iPad that we purchased for him to access IXL, so he's getting the math and reading practice we'd like him to have. So, I think that is part of the conversation for our kindergarten students. I think in first and second grade, there are probably ways to do it. I do, again, think the most important thing is creating expectation around how to use those devices. And frankly, knowing that students are accessing devices younger and younger, even if they're accessing them as they get older, third, fourth, and fifth grade, there are things that we could begin teaching students about digital citizenship and just how to engage with the device, perhaps. And again, thinking back to when we made the switch in the middle of the pandemic, those aren't things that we did. We didn't create the expectation, of course, at that time was you're going to get on a live Zoom meeting, and so it was sort of built in, right? Things have changed, and so now I think we have to create that expectation, something that we didn't do prior to the pandemic.